of scared and discouraged followers of Jesus. That's where the resurrection story in Mark really begins. They had run away. And here at least we have two faithful ones to carry on the work of the Lord. Now I want to say something. I probably should say this as we work through it. These were two women. And that was a patriarchal culture, so it shows a little bit of the radical nature of the faith. These are women witnesses, and God designed it that way. So our hierarchies are in trouble if we don't recognize that. We should. So they're headed over to the tomb to take care of the body of Jesus according to the customs of the Jews and burial practices of that culture. Now, as we move that direction, there's a problem that sort of comes up, and the text says before us. They had a plan, these two devoted women, to anoint the dead body of Jesus. Can you feel their dedication and their tender affection for their Lord and for their teacher? This was indeed an act of devotion. And though they had the spices, they went and purchased those. They left off one detail in their planning that they really hadn't considered and they hadn't thought about. They had forgotten the huge stone that had blocked the entrance of the tomb. I have a huge stone in our driveway, and I was trying to remember this morning and thinking about this sermon, how we got it there. I guess it's been many years ago. I think we had a piece of equipment, a huge piece of equipment to move that big stone. They didn't have that. They had a problem before them, and they needed it. Well, they forgot to account for that, right? And we're not going to fault them for that. I mean, if the other disciples had come along with them, maybe that wouldn't have been a worry at all. But they were either too frightened or too discouraged to come along. And here are these two women. I find it curious that these two devoted disciples were worried over a problem that the Lord had already addressed. Now think about that. I think about my own life. Maybe you think about your lives. How often we worry over issues that God is already working on. And we cause ourselves such pain and suffering. The Bible has something to say about worry, doesn't it? But we won't go there now. But the text is so crystal clear. When the resurrection of Jesus Christ occurred, the power of God was such that not only was Jesus raised from the dead, but I like to think the stone was blown out of the tomb with such power. I think of that song, "Ain't no grave gonna hold my body down." No, it's not like a partial victory. It's not like God sort of moved in the situation and sort of resurrected Jesus with some miraculous sort of CPR procedure, and then, oh, by the way, he's still trapped in the tomb. No, the power of God was unleashed and the stone blew off the tomb door. You know, it's a complete victory, not a partial victory. I like to think of it that way. And I like to think that the victory that God seeks to establish in our lives, that they are complete victories, even if we haven't arrived there yet. Well, I want you to understand here that these women were doing what they knew to do. They had set their alarm for early. They were up with the sun. But it looks like their devotion was off the mark a little bit. They arrived to take care of the body of Jesus. Put some spices on and all that, according to the customs of the culture. But the fact was, and is, that Jesus is alive. He didn't need any spices on that body. In fact, their in the New Testament, when we read about the resurrection, that the disciples are sort of chided for paying too much attention to the earthly remains of Jesus. Like that was the wrong focus, right? It's almost like the disciples really should have known. Maybe they should have listened better. Maybe they should have paid attention during Jesus' earthly ministry. Maybe they should have developed a faith that was stout enough to trust that even in this bleak time, God was at work. God was working out His plan. That wasn't the case. There's another thing that strikes me as I go through this text, is the fascination with Jesus and His resurrected body. When I read the story, I admit I want to kind of push the stone back. I want to get behind the stone, behind the veil of tears. I want a good glimpse at His body as well. It's a spectacle. It's like so cool, this resurrected body. It's got scars, but it still has the scars, but He's okay. He's not hurting anywhere. Can you see His body? Can you imagine His body? Does it resurrect? Does it radiate light? Apparently it does. Is there a halo around His head? Does He defy the laws of gravity? Are you with me? It's kind of cool, His body. We want to kind of dwell there. Can He walk through walls? What happens when He eats fish? Can we watch it go all the way down? All these questions distract us from another transformation that occurs as a result of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, our Lord, from the dead. So maybe the writer of Mark wants us to understand that Jesus is alive, yes. But there's another potential resurrection that he wants to foreground as well. Have we missed it? Have you and I missed it? He wants to describe and bring before our attention and predict, if you want to say it that way, a transformed and energized people of faith doing the work of the Lord. A people that, so to speak, had been dead before, had been hiding out before, had been discouraged before, doing the work of the Lord in this world. That's a resurrection too, right? The text is clear. He sends this ragtag group of discouraged and defeated disciples out into the world to preach the gospel to the world. It kind of makes the job of moving the stone seem to be pretty small, doesn't it? But the passage suggests that the great power of God that blew the stone off the mouth of the cave when Jesus was resurrected would likewise animate this group of disciples in their work that they've been called to do. I know on Easter, you want to see, I do too, you want to see Jesus floating through the walls, all decked out with His radiant clothing. But look again at the close of the text, at this resurrected people. Does it give you hope that you and I, that our churches, that our communities, that our country, that our world could tap into the resurrection power of Jesus Christ our Lord? Now maybe I can anticipate some of the criticism. Aren't you diverting the attention from the Lord to somewhere else where it doesn't need to be? I don't think I'm guilty of that. I think the writer of